dan Assalamualaikum pada semua.
Salam.
Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera dan salam madani. Terlebih dahulu saya perkenalkan dirilah. Saya Suhailah penolong pendaftar Pusat Pengajian Pembangunan Ungku Aziz mewakili pengarah kita yang bahagia Datin Seri Profesor Dr. Suhaiza Hanim binti Datuk Muhammad Zailani. Okey, hari ini saya amat mengalu-alukanlah kedatangan semua ke Ungku Aziz Talk and Public Policy Public Lecture Series 4 2025 Anjuran Pusat Pengajian Pembangunan Ungku Aziz. Dan ini merupakan satu platform penting dalam meraihkan wacana intelektual yang membentuk dasar serta pemikiran kebangsaan. Okey, topik kita hari ini adalah Equalising Opportunities in Malaysia, Local Rejoinders. Saya harap sesi ini dapat menyemai kefahaman yang lebih mendalam serta mencetus idea-idea bernas demi memajukan dasar yang lebih adil dan saksama dalam Malaysia lah. So, tanpa buang masa, saya ingin menyerahkan sesi ini kepada kita punya moderator hari ini iaitu Dr. Mahazril Aini. Yang merupakan senior lecturer dan head of program bagi Bachelor of Administrative Science dari Universiti Teknologi UiTM untuk mengenalkan sesi ini serta memperkenalkan penceramah terhormat kita. Dipersilakan, Dr.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Miss Suhaila. Assalamualaikum and good morning to all distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, and of course to our dear Dr. Khairil. I would also like to say welcome to today's public lecture series organized by Ungku Aziz Center for Development Study. And I would like to make some housekeeping notes. As we are about to begin shortly, I would like to inform that the audience that if you have any kind of the question that you want to ask the speaker, you may at any time open up your speaker and ask directly to the speaker to respond to the question. So we do it like the informal session for today's public lecture series. And when we talk about equalizing opportunity in Malaysia, local rejoinders, this is one of the interesting topic, and this topic tackle a questions central to our Malaysians' future, and how do we equalize the opportunity in the society where we have so many challenges and competing narrative. So when you hear about the equal opportunity, so what's your first thought? Okay, race-based policy, urban-rural divide, wealth inequality, gender or disability gap. So I guess this is the area that sparks debates and criticism among the public in our country. And with that, we have the experts today, okay, on board with us. Allow me to introduce Dr. Khairil Izamin Ahmad. Okay, so Dr. Khairil Izamin is a political theorist and public policy researcher with more than 15 years research, teaching, and management experience in the non-profit and higher education sector. So Dr. Khairil holds master's and doctoral degree in political theory from the University of Essex, UK, and he is currently the director of MySDG for social inclusion, the policy think tank of all party parliamentary group Malaysia on sustainable development goal. And Dr. Khairil also currently attached with School of Policy and International School of Politics and International Relations from University of Nottingham, Malaysia. And Dr. Khairil has vast experience, including public policy in the area of social cohesion, democracy and governance, criminal justice reform, poverty eradication, and social media regulation. And with this vast experience, I think Dr. Khairil is one of the important person and experienced person to share with us the insight about the topic today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Khairil Ahmad. Doctor, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahazril. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend the lecture. Is a very big word lah. But yeah, as Dr. Mahazril mentioned earlier, we'd like to keep this more informal and casual. So I'll be speaking, but along the way, if you know, if anybody's interested to interject, if you've got any comments or questions, or you've got anything to add, feel free to come to the mic, and I'll be happy to give you the floor lah, so that we can have a friendlier kind of discussion for the next couple of hours. But before that, I'd also like to thank the Ungku Aziz Center for Development, UAC, especially Prof. Datin Sri Suhaiza, who I know quite well because I was informing Dr. Mahazril before we came to the room just now. I actually served in for a year, and I left last year, so I was attached with in Puma, and I was teaching in the Masters of Public Policy program. So I'm very familiar with the folks in and I've got many friends there. So it's very nice to be invited to come and deliver this talk or lecture. I'm also happy that Dr. Mahazril introduced me as a political theorist and public policy researcher, because the first caveat I'd like to make today, so let me just share my screen first before I continue. The first caveat that I wanted to make today is that I am not an economist, because I'm aware that discussions related to the topic of equality is something that that can be attributed to the domain of the economist. But yeah, this is not going to be an economic talk, although a lot of the discussion will be touching upon economic related or economic oriented issues. And I'd like to focus on just one particular issue here, and that issue is, as Dr. Mahazril very rightly and also excellently introduced earlier, equality of opportunity, because this is something that has actually, I mean, it's always been in public discussion in Malaysia, but recently there was a report that was launched back in February, a report that's a joint publication between the World Bank and also the Ministry of Economy, that tries to look at the issue of inequality and also mobility from what they call a fresh perspective. And that's basically the motivation behind this presentation today. But I'd like to relate the discussion to our experience here in APPGM SDG. So I'll introduce to you as well the work that we do, and offer some rejoinders. Some rejoinder is also a big word, but offer some of our own unique perspective on the issues that I like to highlight that's related to the discussion surrounding inequality or equality of opportunity in Malaysia, specifically those that are covered in the World Bank report. So basically that's the plan for today. So what I'd like to do is as follows, as you can see on the screen. First, I'd like to just spend a few minutes offering some theoretical notes on this notion of equality of opportunity. And then I'd like to also very quickly discuss why equality of opportunity is seen in policy discussion as a very important thing to be looked into. And I'll list a few possible outcomes that I believe would emerge from measures that we can take in terms of equalizing opportunities. And then I'll discuss the World Bank report. It's a big report, but I'll discuss some key points from the report that's relevant to the aim of the lecture. And then I'll proceed to offer 4 rejoinders from APPGM SDG and the work that we do across the country at the grassroots level. So these 4 rejoinders will bring together reflections on a few issues that we believe that needs to be tackled properly in order for there to be a more effective response to the question of equality of opportunity in the country. So that's basically the plan for today. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what I'm going to be discussing today is motivated by the report here that you can see on the slide. I'll share the slides, and if you have the slides later, you can just click on the image and it'll take you to the site where you can download the report. It's actually quite a big report. It's quite comprehensive. I will not be able to cover everything that's discussed in the report. I'll try to be as non-technical as possible by just discussing some of the key points that are relevant to the discussion today. But just a bit of background as well. The reason why we at APPG MySDG were very interested in the report is because we thought that some of the arguments are actually very important to be looked into, especially in terms of making sure that development and its benefits are distributed more evenly across the country. But this is based on the kind of observations that we have through the work that we do when we go down to the ground to meet grassroots communities to try to map outstanding socio-economic concerns that they still face in the spirit of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda, because that's basically the framework within which we work. So I'll try to bring together all these elements in the discussion or in the talk today. And before this, early in the month, we actually held a panel discussion where we actually discussed the report already. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today will also be based on that discussion. In that, I'll be bringing some of the key points that we actually highlighted during the discussions together to be discussed or to be presented to all of you today. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the report covers a lot of things, but I'm just dissecting one particular aspect of it, which I think is quite key anyway, in order for us to try to understand the remaining challenges that we still have in the country, because the report highlights some very concerning facts or information about the state of inequality in Malaysia. So I'll also have a list of those concerns and challenges as we proceed in this talk. But just to have just a small theoretical detour before we go into the report itself. Equality of opportunity is something that's always been in discussion, and it's something that has always been prominent within philosophical discussions, most especially. Of course, later on, the discussion also emerged within other fields, including economics, as I mentioned earlier, but also in public policy. Because amongst philosophers at least, it's something that is of interest in order to make sure that the dignity of the human person can be ensured as the individual proceeds, or as the individual lives within his social setting. So it's something that's very prominent within philosophical discussions. It's also something that in policy has been taken up within many different contexts in terms of ensuring that everybody will have the opportunity or to have a level playing field in terms of accessing opportunities that would allow them to experience progress and also mobility in life. However, just highlighting a quote that's very interesting here from the British socialist thinker Tawney from 1931. This is a conception, he says, that's paid, it's to which homage is paid today by all, including those who resist most strenuously attempts to apply it. But the rhetorical tribute which it receives appears sometimes to be paid on the understanding that it shall be content with ceremonial honors. It's just a very interesting quote that I found that highlights the fact that sometimes acknowledgement of the importance of equality of opportunity may not necessarily translate into real action. Because I think if I were to put it to all of you and I were to ask you this question, right? Do you think that it's important for us to try to level the playing field for everyone so that everyone has a chance to make it in life and to make sure that nobody is left behind in terms of enjoying this opportunity to progress or to improve and to experience mobility in life? I would assume that everybody would say yes. But whether or not this acknowledgement is translated into practice is another story. And sometimes within context where this has been translated into practice, a lot of challenges remain in terms of making sure that the benefits that people stand to enjoy from equality of opportunity are indeed realized as they progress in life. And that's something that I think is quite apparent as we speak today in the current world. If you take a look at context where equality of opportunity was very much emphasized, say, for example, context where there are strong welfare structures, say the Northern European social democracies, for example, which have put in place structures that are very much based upon the belief in providing everyone equal opportunity. You can see nowadays trends where the outcomes of those opportunities are not necessarily enjoyed in a positive way across their populations. And in Malaysia, as I mentioned earlier, this is something that may not necessarily be so prominent within at least the public discussion. It's prominent within academic discussion, but for this kind of things to take traction in practice as well, it needs to also be made prominent in public discussion. And this is why when I was asked to come and do this lecture, I thought this is something that I should bring to the table because it's a public lecture. So I'll get to engage with more than just academics. And maybe one of the outcome of the lecture would be a surge of interest in trying to discuss equality of opportunity in the country. But the aim of the lecture, I mentioned the outcome, the aim is basically to reflect upon the relevance of the concept of equality of opportunity in the Malaysian context through the APP-GM SDGs experience in localizing the SDG 2030 agenda across different locations in Malaysia. I'm sure that everyone's heard of the SDG agenda, even if you're not familiar with the details of it. I'm sure you've come across mentions of the SDGs, or you've seen the SDG graphics or logos in your um, in your in your daily life lah, in your academic endeavors, in your in your discussions, if you're on social media, if you engage with the news and all that, because it's a very prominent um, agenda that's been cascaded from the level of the United Nations onto all its member states. So basically all the countries in the world lah. And Malaysia is one of those countries that's very serious in taking in aligning development goals domestically with the broader SDG agenda. So APPGM SDG is one of the agencies in the country that assists the government in mainstreaming the SDG agenda. And our mandate is to basically localize the agenda. So meaning we bring the agenda down to the ground and we try to work within the SDG framework, and we try to highlight, we try to address as well issues that people still face, hardships that people still face, and we try to identify groups and communities that are still left behind in the country's development agenda. Because the transformative promise of the SDGs is that no one should be left behind. So we've got a lot of data, we've got a massive body of data where we document challenges that people face on the ground. And a lot of them are actually related to the lack of opportunity. And this is something that I'll be highlighting today. Okay. But before that, a bit more on the theoretical front, just to make sure that we have a proper context of the discussion, and that's so we'll just try to address about this concept first. What exactly is equality of opportunity? This is something from Peter Weston, a moral philosopher, and he says every statement of opportunity consists of three covert elements. One is the agent or class of agents, meaning any individuals or group of individuals to whom opportunities belong. And by default, all of us have opportunities, right? In our social dealings, in order to pursue different things in life. And when there's opportunities, there's also goals or set of goals towards which the opportunities are directed. So let's say the opportunity is education. Education is not an end in itself. It's indeed the opportunity that's presented to us or that's accessible to us. But through education, we are intending to achieve a higher goal, or we're intending to achieve particular objectives, and that those goals or objectives can only be attained by us by way of actually utilizing the opportunity to education. But it's not as easy as just having opportunity or seeing an opportunity and utilizing the opportunity. There's also the relationship that connects the agent of the opportunity with the opportunity. And this is something that's very much contingent on a lot of factors, right? So let's say I'm the individual and I am looking at an opportunity, i.e. education, just to continue with our example. And I know that through education, I can actually proceed towards a different position in life, right? From not having education to having education. And having education would bring about a lot of benefits. But in order for me to utilize that opportunity and also obtain the benefit of the opportunity, there are circumstances which may be out of my control, right? So this third element is the most elusive one, according to Western. Because an opportunity is not a guarantee, because agents are rarely, if ever, guaranteed that they will ever attain their desired goals. Because a lot of factors, a lot of variables will be in the way between me and the opportunity itself. So that's the more philosophical discussion lah. But it's very important for us to keep that in mind, because the argument with regard to equalizing opportunity is we need proper measures and policies to make sure that those circumstances that are not within the control of the individual can be mitigated, so that that individual is able to access the particular opportunity. So that's basically the definition of what opportunity is, and why we are looking at this notion of equality of opportunity. The other thing is a bit more, the other issue that I like to discuss is a little bit less philosophical, but a bit more, it has more practical implication. And that is that when people are talking about equality, typically, what's being discussed is actually what we call equality of outcome. So if we were to reflect on any discussions that we've had, say with our colleagues or with our friends, or if we've engaged with discussion about equality, it's important to maybe try to ascertain whether or not the discussion is very much revolving around this notion of equality or outcome, and whether or not a discussion about equality of opportunity is also there. They're not mutually exclusive, but what I'm saying is that for the most part, the emphasis in general in say even policy discussions is about equality of outcome, which focuses on the equal distribution, say, of economic outcomes, because we're talking about economic equality here. For example, like income, right? It's a lot of discussion. If you talk about if you come across discussions about equality, then a lot of the focus will be very much trained upon questions such as, are people actually enjoying parity when it comes to their income attainment? Are people actually having enough capacity or having equal capacity in order to consume basic goods, for example? Are people actually enjoying similar levels of well-being as an outcome of equality? Which is a very important discussion. But what's also important here is the journey towards the outcome. And that's what equality of opportunity is basically looking at. Because when you're talking about equality of opportunity, if you recall the theoretical discussion that we had in the previous slide from Peter Weston, right? You're separating the influences on the outcomes into circumstances, factors that are outside individual control, and also effort, the actions and choices of within that are within individual responsibility. So these are two separate things. That's the argument. There are influences that lead towards outcome that are driven by factors that we cannot actually control. I give some examples after this. And of course, if we want to basically enjoy progress or mobility in life, we also need to take the initiative. So there's an element of responsibility as well there. But the argument that quality of opportunity is saying is that it's difficult for me to take responsibility or to take action to utilize opportunity in order to progress in life if I am actually facing influences that I really cannot control. And what are those circumstances? Those circumstances can include the following. I mean, you can lengthen the list, but I think these are some of the important ones, and they're also relevant to the discussion that I want to have today. Let's say you're born into a poor household, right? You're born into a household with parents with low income or low education level. Now, your start in life is already not the same, or the opportunity that you'll have in life may not necessarily already be the same with that which is enjoyed by somebody who's born in a different sort of household, maybe with a household that's a bit sort of wealthier, with more educated parents. Ethnicity as well is something that we can't control. Which ethnic group we're born into. It's not something we decide pre-birth. We're just born into particular ethnic groups. And trends of poverty, not only in Malaysia, but in Malaysia it's very important because ethnicity is one of the main markers of social and public policies still in the country. But you take a look outside Malaysia, even in Western context, ethnicity has become a very important consideration when looking at issues related to poverty, issues related to social mobility, and also equality. Gender as well, right? I mean, we're born into the genders that we're assigned to. And for the most part, some of us will benefit from our gender more than others. And some of us, I mean, would be men, right? Because girls and women, they face a lot of challenges because of this circumstance, right? Also location, where we're born, where we live, would also have an impact on our access to opportunity. And this is also something that we cannot control, right? So one of the key thing here is upbringing in urban versus rural households, right? The opportunities that may be enjoyed by somebody who has been brought up within the urban centers may actually be different from the rural ones. But having said that, of course, I'm not saying that anyone who's born in the urban centers would have better opportunities than those who are born in the rural households. But of course, if you look at equality figures and all that, you can see that, of course, the urban sort of settings would be the locations where more opportunities that are driven by modern economic activities are available. And that's something we can return to as well later, because I think we should also problematize the assumption that it's only modern economic opportunities that should be privileged over other forms of economic opportunities that may be available in the rural areas. The other one is health status. Sometimes we don't choose to be in ill health, but we are in ill health, and have an impact on whether or not we can access certain opportunities. Of course, then if you were to reverse the picture, then you can also list down advantages that certain individuals or groups enjoy that would allow them to access opportunities better than others. This is something that I've taken from Acharya and Romer, they highlight or they list four different advantages. One is status advantage. And this comes from belonging to a certain social category. A particular individual or groups can basically come from maybe a certain privileged ethnic group, for example, or coming from a certain social class, membership, for example, in a recognized sort of elite class or elite group within a particular society. So, for example, maybe groups or individuals with noble ancestry, for example. There's also socio-economic advantage. This comes from having successful parents who invest in their children. So that would give the individual or the group a head start in life compared to those who don't actually enjoy this socio-economic advantage. You also have network and positional advantage. This is very much related to the question of location that I highlighted earlier. Where we're born, where we live, where we grow up can have an impact on whether or not we can enjoy social mobility in life. And the last one is health related, biological advantage. So this is advantage that comes from or comes with the absence of mental or physical disabilities. People who don't suffer from ill health or disabilities would have more advantage than those who do. It's just this is just the four things. And in general, according to Acharya and Romer, this is something that public policies have tried to address in any context. But depending on the context, the measures that are taken would be very different. Okay. So then the big question here is whether or not we should accept differences in outcomes when they're due to circumstances that individuals cannot be held accountable for. Not asking anyone to answer this, but feel free to come to the mic if you'd like to have a discussion on this. But this is basically in the context of this discussion about equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. This is the big question. Should we accept differences in outcomes when they're due to circumstances that individuals cannot be held accountable for? And if our answer is yes, then susah. Then we can stop the discussion here. But if our answer is no, then the next thing to look into is how exactly do we try to account for those circumstances that some people within our communities and societies cannot control, and how do we mitigate those circumstances so that they can actually enjoy the same kind of opportunities, or they can enjoy the same kind of chances that we have, if we are not suffering from those issues that's beyond our control. But that's not to say, so just to go back to the notion of responsibility here, that's not to say that we're absolving people from any responsibility in terms of trying to progress in life. We're saying here that in order for people to take the effort and in order for people to take or to be responsible for their actions, they have to be given the platform that would allow them to actually take meaningful effort towards progressing or towards enjoying mobility. Okay, so what then are the outcomes from any attempts to equalize opportunities? These are some, but again, the list can go longer. One would be that we would be reducing systemic inequalities. We'd be removing barriers to access essential services. And of course, today, a lot of the discussion is trained upon the issue of education access, also healthcare access, but also, of course also access to wealth in general. These are the kind of things that are needed. These are the kind of essential services that are needed to make sure that in the long run, as a society, we'd be able to remove systemic inequalities. Of course, then we'd also be enabling social mobility, because then the question of effort would come in, right? Through hard work, people can experience improvements in their socio-economic status, however we may define it. At the moment in Malaysia, as I'll discuss later, we'll still define it via income. Then, of course, for the society as well, that we experience better overall economic growth in the sense that everyone's talents and contributions can be accounted for. So economic growth is not just the contribution of the few, but the many. Otherwise, a lot of people will be excluded from contributing, even if they'd like to contribute. Of course, from the perspective of unity, we would be able to foster stronger social cohesion. There'll be fewer people left behind, and this would lead to better social trust. And this is something that social cohesion is something that's very, of course, obviously very prominent in policy discussions. And inevitably, there needs to be a discussion about whether or not economic inequality is contributing towards social cohesion of the lack of it. And if we were to go back to health, then of course, overall, there'd be better levels of public health, in that we'll see lower levels of poverty-induced health problems. These are some of the outcomes. I'll come back later to this because I'd like to problematize a little bit the way we think about quality of opportunity. But just a quick Malaysian context as well. Just a quick historical context here with regard to addressing inequality. This is something that's very much key in the country's development agenda, not just recently, but for the past many decades. If we'd like to pinpoint a particular moment in history, then a lot of scholars would say, since the new economic policy, development planning in the country, and also successive strategic vision documents have always prioritized addressing inequality in its various forms, among other things. And of course, the kind of aspects that this goal has looked into includes making sure that there's education opportunities for all Malaysians, making sure that healthcare access is available across the country. And this is a bit more historical. If we were to go back to some of the early goals of development in the country, was to make sure that there is more and more opportunity for people to accumulate capital and assets, so that they enjoy greater share of or they enjoy greater share of wealth in the country. And as we have progressed through the different historical moments in our history, we've also, of course, become an industrialized sort of nation with modern economic opportunities. And with that came urbanization. And through this context, successive planning documents, successive strategic visions, the current one, of course, is the Madani Economic Vision, as we speak, has always been alert, or has always been looking into what are the outstanding challenges um, that still out there affecting different communities in the country, and what are the steps that needs to be taken. And those challenges include, of course, wealth inequality, income inequality, differential levels of regional development. That's the more bigger picture issue, and so on, right? At different moments in our planning stage, of course, we'll be addressing specific issues, and we're having the 13th Malaysia plan coming soon. There's going to be a series of things that'll be looked into in order to address current development challenges in the country. But I'd like to fast forward to the scenario today, because I'd like to go now into the discussion about inequality today. Of course, and this is something that the World Bank document also mentions. Malaysia is one of those countries amongst its global south and post-colonial counterparts that have experienced admirable record of economic growth, and also an impressive record of poverty reduction in the past 50 years or so. It has a modern industrialized economy. It's experienced high rates of urbanization. It has produced a highly educated population. And of course, the buzzword nowadays, at least since the past few years, has been the national sort of objective of becoming a high-income country. This is something that I'm sure everyone has heard of. And this is something that is very much at the center of our development goal. And it's been maintained across successive governments. We've had change of government so many times already in the past few years. But becoming a high-income country is one of those constant national goals that we're focused towards. And we will indeed, again, according to the World Bank, we will indeed be attaining the high-income country status by around 2028, 2030. But there is a but there. However, according to the report, it's a high-income country where many Malaysians will miss out from enjoying that status. And the report projects that by the time the country achieves the high-income country status, less than half of Malaysians will actually become high-income individuals. So that's one of the main sort of takeaway that we got from the report, right? Households, according to the report, many, they lack material and human capital assets that can be invested towards future mobility. So these are assets, these are the kind of holdings that households have today that would allow them to be passed to future generations within their households, so that the future generations can enjoy a better position than the current sort of generation. So the children can enjoy a better position than the parents today. So you have a situation where households will be in a situation where the children of today's parents may not necessarily be able to have a better life, at least in terms of income and wealth, compared to the parents, because there's a lack of assets, and those assets include things like human capital, like different skill sets, for example, education, but also physical sort of capital, physical holdings, physical wealth, right? Money, for example, and so on, right? And that's I think one of those things that's feeding into the impending retirement crisis that will be that the government is looking into as well to address. The report also said that assessed that inequality actually declined from 2004 to 2014. This was when growth was pro-poor, but after that, so between 2015 to 2019, and then COVID came, and then after COVID as well, when the recovery stage actually, or the recovery from the pandemic actually started, growth was lower for most households, meaning previously growth was good, especially for the for the poor. So you can see a trend towards convergence in the curve. But after that, it was that was less the case, according to the report. So households experienced little change to the income that they were actually enjoying. And that's something, according to the report, that needs to be addressed. Also, spatial inequality is something that is still very much an issue in the country. Spatial inequality means inequality between different, for example, different geographical locations, whereby there are differences in terms of wealth and income attainments between different states and region. And this is something that is even more pronounced when you take a look at the differences between West and East Malaysia, according to the report. Inter-ethnic inequality is still an issue, according to the report, but there is an often overlooked fact, and that fact is actually intra-group inequality. Inequality within groups, and this is, according to the report, more pronounced when you compare inequalities within the Bumiputra group, especially when you look at the context of Sabah and Sarawak. So the report uses the word lagging, which if I recall, some of my colleagues from Sabah and Sarawak were not so happy about because of how it's framed, but that's what the report actually says, right? So the Bumiputra groups in Sabah and Sarawak within the within the broader Bumiputra group itself still behind compared to their counterparts in West Malaysia, in the peninsula. And that is something that also is alarming when you consider the state of inequality in the country. The report also actually, and I think this is one of the value add in the report, it has a survey. The researchers conducted a survey in collaboration with DOSM, Department of Statistics, to try to gauge the perception of Malaysians about inequality in the country. And one interesting finding that can be highlighted here is that although Malaysians recognize the importance of hard work, in order to better themselves, many in the survey actually feel that it does not lead to better economic prospects. I think about 40% out of all respondents, and this is something that the report itself highlights. We don't know the reason for that, but the fact that that perception is there is something that is also quite an important finding. Right? Okay. And the report then also offers a series of policy measures or recommends a series of policy measures to address actually inequality in general in Malaysia. There are 5 different themes that are listed in the report. but I'm only highlighting those that are relevant to inequality of opportunities. And indeed, this is the first, in addressing inequality of opportunities is the first amongst the 5 themes that are highlighted in the report. And the first one is apologies, I'm just looking for my notes. The first one relates to the fact that, and I think this is something that is commonly known, the fact that there is currently a lot of issues with regard to unemployed graduates, for example, and also mismatch between the qualifications that people have and also the work that they do in the labor market. So the report calls for there to be a better use of underutilized labor in the country. The second measure that was recommended in order to address inequality of opportunities is to improve the quality of education and skills development in areas and amongst households that lack the national average. So this is basically a call for there to be more reskilling and upskilling opportunities for people who are residing in specific areas or locations. And also, the third one, increase investment in broad-based human capital development early in the life cycle, because the idea of the framework that the report uses is what it calls the life cycle approach. So it takes a look at how exactly can we actually account for the lack of opportunity for people from birth until death. So it's trying to tackle the need for there to be opportunities for everyone to access wherever they may be from early on in life. And this is related to, for example, investments in, of course, healthcare, but that would be inclusive of things like antenatal care, early childhood education, and so on. And of course, it also highlighted the fact that, and this is something that is actually affecting national SDG achievement as well, especially for SDG number 2, which is zero hunger. It also highlights the fact that health-wise, the country is also looking at the issue of stunting amongst children. So nutrition access as well is something that needs to be looked into as part of the measures to address inequality of opportunities in the country. But there's also one which I think is also relevant for the sake of our discussion today, and that's addressing spatial inequality. And this is not, this is also listed amongst one of the 5, but it's the fourth recommendation amongst the others. So if you're interested to know the other recommendation or the other theme of the policy measures that are recommended would be strengthening social protection, financing inclusive investments, and also monitoring inequality. But we're not covering that one. I just want to highlight these 2 before I offer our rejoinders from APPJM SDG. So in the theme addressing spatial inequalities, the policy recommendation is to use place-based and place-sensitive policies to address spatial inequalities. And I think this is a theme that's very important. And it's really good that a report as important as this is acknowledging this need. Because one of the arguments that we make here in APPGM SDG is the importance of actually recognizing the uniqueness of different locations and different groups across the country, and drawing from the strength of those uniqueness in order to make sure that we can tap into the potential of communities in working towards better outcomes for everyone. So the argument is, you cannot have a one-size-fits-all kind of development expectations for everyone across different locations in the country. And this is, I think, an important policy recommendations that's coming out from the report. And there's a lot of convergence in terms of the work that we do in APPGM SDG, and the kind of findings and also the recommendations that the report have given. But there are also nuances that we have found in our work that would contribute better to the policy discussion. Just sharing with you here the pictures from our initial discussion about the report on the 7th of April. And I remember one of the observations that my colleagues have with regard to especially the recommendations from the report is they can be quite generic. I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that I've highlighted in the previous slide are quite familiar to many of you because they're not necessarily original as such. They're very much already rehearsed within policy discussions, but they are nonetheless important, as I mentioned, to be reiterated. But what's missing, and this is the main sort of argument that we have, perhaps a recognition of the complexities of realities on the ground. And this is something that we thought we can actually contribute in terms of the nuances. So the 4 rejoinders that I'd like to discuss would be one, just a rhetorical question. What kind of outcomes and what kind of opportunities are we talking about? We also want to call for policy discourse to be more inclusive. And that the third one is that we also think that right now there's an urgent need for there to be more efforts towards revitalizing rural areas, for there to be more inclusive development and also equitable distribution of the country's distribution of prosperity across the country. And we also have some rejoinders about data and how official data, although they may be actually very good because they give you the big picture perspective of the situation on the ground, could be better served as well with ground level findings that organizations like us actually have. But first, because I've been talking so much about APPGM SDG, many of you may not necessarily be familiar with the work that we do. I've given you a quick sort of introduction to our organization. We actually, our mandate is actually from the Parliament of Malaysia. And what we do is what we call localization of the SDGs on the ground. And we work through, we work by going into all the different parliamentary constituencies in the country. And since 2020, when we started our activities, until now, as we speak, we have already visited 143 constituencies. And the aim is to basically complete all 222 in the coming years. The SDG agenda ends in 2030, so the aim is to be done with the work before then. Just sharing with you the map of all the constituencies that we've already visited across the country. And just very quickly also share with you the kind of work that we do. So we work across a range of things, starting from work at the very grassroots of the communities across all these different parliamentary areas, all the way up to the policy making level, the legislative level in the parliament. And the key aspect of our work is basically what we call our issue mapping activity, where we conduct site visits in all these different constituencies, and we meet different groups within those constituencies, and we try to, and we ask them what are the issues, what are the socio-economic issues and challenges that they still face. And then once we have mapped those issues with the data that we have, we will start our conversations with different levels of authorities, starting from the district level. And along the way, we also have other activities. We implement different projects within these constituencies. We call them solutions projects, where we help those local communities to try to address some of the challenges that they face. We also conduct capacity development. So basically, we work with local authorities, local leaders. We try to enhance their capacity in the SDG understanding, because the SDG goals cover, every aspect of development possible through all the 17 goals. And we do impact assessment. We take a look at what sort of impact have our work had on all these different communities. But the data that we have, we also bring them up to the parliamentary level, where we invite different stakeholders, including ministries and government agencies, and we tell them that, look, there are issues that still happening on the ground that needs to be looked into, and we try to get their feedback as to what are the measures that they have taken or they can take in collaboration with all the relevant stakeholders in order to address those challenges. So the kind of data that we have is very important in the sense that they can actually furnish what policymakers actually already know. And this is, I think, I've been quite positive about the report, and I think the report has a lot of strength and value add for our discussion about equality in Malaysia. But there's got to be also, or what it lacks is voices from the ground, right? Data from ground reality, because the report is very much dependent on most especially statistical data from DOSM. And this is something that we have been pushing in our activities. So since I've been given the opportunity to speak in this lecture, so I'll also propagate this to all of you lah. Because our research agenda is one that is very much rooted in what we call grounded research. We do research on the ground, we tease out problems from the ground, and we present those problems in the public domain to have a discussion as to what can be done to address those problems. So it's a qualitative approach rather than a quantitative one. It's one which yields very rich data, one that tells rich and complex stories of the lived realities of communities on the ground, communities that are still left behind. So when we go to the ground, we speak to different groups, smallholder farmers. We speak to different different ethnic groups at the local levels. We speak to the youth within the localities that we visit. We speak to traders, smallholder traders, for example. We speak to the disabled, people with disabilities, and we find issues that are still outstanding that we would like to discuss with policymakers. So you're free to come and take a look at the work that we do, because we're an open data sort of organization as well. So we share everything that we have because we'd like to spur public discussion And from my side, as the director of the Center for Social Inclusion, I'm also interested to further our research agenda, which is very much driven by more ethnographic kind of approach, very driven by grounded case study, to try to basically come up with rich textual data from the ground. Okay, so the four rejoinders. One is, as I mentioned earlier, the argument that one size fits all model actually will not help address. I put here spatial inequalities, but it will not help address any inequalities. When you're talking about a country that is very diverse, not only in terms of its cultural makeup, but also in terms of its geographical makeup. So I think there's a lot to think about when it comes to policy making, to try to make sure that the focus is not on just a particular outcome that's driven by the national agenda that's very much preset and predefined, but it needs to be something that acknowledges the diversity of the society and the possibility for there to be a diversity of different outcomes that people can enjoy. And that would allow for a kind of thinking about opportunity that will be more, that we context sensitive. So if you're talking about regional disparities, for example, they should be addressed via greater collaboration and partnerships between different levels of policymaking in order to make sure that whatever development agenda that's implemented would be suited to the local context, rather than one that is very much driven by a top-down kind of perspective. And this is something that we have found from our engagements, not only with communities on the ground, but also with local authorities and also the more kind of state-level authorities across the country. And that's one of the key sort of messages that we have been bringing to the policy discussion table. And that then would also relate to education, because it's one of those essential opportunities that needs to be looked into. And this is something that's a bit more tentative. And I testing these arguments and see where it goes after this. Right? Educational attainment can perhaps be measured more contextually and flexibly. Meaning there has to be equality of opportunity in education, but at the same time, how education is actually understood and tailored may actually need to be mapped onto the needs of local context. So this is something that is actually quite prominent in the discussion surrounding education. It'd be interesting to see, and this is something that I believe even the Ministry of Education is aware. It'd be interesting to see what kind of messaging we'll get in the coming education blueprint as well, because the current blueprint is expiring this year, so it's the next one is due to be released for next year. Whether or not there be an acknowledgement that education can be a bit more decentralized in order to fulfill the needs of different communities, because some of the challenges that we actually have uncovered during our visits to the ground is that it's not that there is little interest in education, but there's also this argument about whether or not the types of education that's available for access on the ground can actually serve local needs. The kind of skills that can be offered, for example, can serve local needs. Next is with regard to the measure of mobility and also well-being. So I mentioned earlier, the measure is still that's used by the report is still income, it does actually give reasons as to why income is still used as the measure for equality, mobility, and well-being. But perhaps in the future, there's got to be more. There's got to be a more multidimensional approach, and this is something that we've also been doing through our work, especially with our multidimensional poverty work that's undertaken by my colleagues in APPGM SDG as well. It's just a work to try to uncover the kind of non-income related challenges that people face, and to try to see how those challenges can be addressed effectively on the ground. And from there, we're also planning to discuss with policymakers about the need for different indicators to be included in our poverty measure. Second is a call for policy discourse to be more inclusive. Because there's a feeling that national level policy discourse is always focused on, or at least the emphasis is quite focused on big sounding, or the so-called game-changing industries to spur future economic growth. The discussion currently is about AI and cloud computing and becoming data centers and so on. But less national level discussion is actually being had on how to galvanize local and community-based economies. And this is something that is quite important because outside Klang Valley, most especially, life can be rather different for grassroots communities. And in a lot of cases, the discussion at the national level on future direction of the country's development and so on may not necessarily speak to the kind of concerns that people have on the ground. Why is this important? It's not just about making sure that the discussion is more proliferated to include other forms of economies as well. It's important because at the end of the day, we think, and because of all the global upheavals that we're looking at today, of course, the focus, including in the report, is about recovery from the COVID pandemic. But of course, as we speak as well today, there's a lot of things that's happening around us that's actually threatening the global economic ecosystem as such. Economic resilience need to be also approached by way of acknowledging that in the end of the day, it's what we can actually galvanize and mobilize at the local levels that would actually allow for our communities to actually have the resilience and also be shock-proof if more shocks were to happen in the future. And here, we also not only, our discussion is always driven by this in APPGM SDG. Not only community-based economies in general, agriculture in many areas, for example, but also calling for a shift towards supporting solidarity-based economies. So economic activities that are very much driven by a sense of community ownership, doing ethical business, and also making sure that environmental needs are actually addressed, and also making sure that there's sustainability, that particular economic activities will contribute to the societies. And that sustainability would come from the fact that solidarity-based economies are actually drawing from the strength of local communities. And this is something that's important to also at least make everyone feel like they actually belong in the economic discourse, to make sure that people actually know that there is a room for everybody to actually contribute um, uh, in the country's development. So that's the second rejoinder. The third one is about rural revitalization, which is a crucial factor for sustainable development, but also very crucial in order to spread prosperity across different spatial locations. This is something that we've also been discussing internally in APPG MySDG. It's something that we may actually want to push even stronger because during our visits, I've actually just returned from Jasin in Malacca. We went to Jasin, the Jasin constituency to do issue mapping. During our visits, we realized that there's a strong desire amongst communities who live within the more rural contexts to actually enhance local economic activities. But this needs to be done with support from the government. For example, small farmers in a lot of areas are suffering from challenges in terms of marketing their products. And many of them feel that they are not getting adequate support when they indeed would like to expand and also maintain their involvement in all the different agricultural activities that they are doing. And these are not just the more senior generations, but there's also a strong desire amongst youth in these areas to actually remain within their communities and to undertake local-based economies, for example, again, agriculture, and contribute to their societies. But what's been happening, unfortunately, is basically rural migration, especially amongst the young, in order to go to more urbanized centers to undertake work that means that they would be far away from their own communities. And in a lot of cases, rural migration actually does not necessarily promise more prosperity or a better future. And this is, of course, evidenced by figures that will show us about the rates of urban poverty, especially in the big cities. So this is something that is important to be spotlighted from our perspective, because there's a lot of potential for prosperity to be spread across all these different communities if the right kind of support is given to these groups. And the fourth and the last one is related to data. This is I don't know. I mean, this is one of the grievances that we have also lah with regard to data. There's a lot of emphasis nowadays in focusing on or in making use of official data, a lot of which are statistical, which are actually indeed, good in terms of capturing different trends, different socioeconomic trends. Right? This is not in dispute, although there are cases, and this is what we've experienced, where sometimes DOSM data, when they are taken to different locations, when they're presented in different locations in the country, can actually get disputed by local stakeholders who would say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's not necessarily true." But overall, of course, official data is very important because they can, of course, track and monitor shifts and changes that are more longitudinal at the more sort of big picture level. But at the same time, because statistical data may actually lack narrative, they don't necessarily fully capture people's lived realities. And this is where organizations like us come in, where we can offer more contextual data and provide real life stories for statistical findings. And for the most part, a lot of what we find actually do align with official data. But at the same time, the data would provide a lot of nuances in order to explain what exactly are the problems that communities face in their daily lives on the ground. But sometimes you also be in a situation where official data may suggest that things are working on the ground, but they're not necessarily people's lived realities. And this is something that we've actually highlighted already in our policy engagements. Because sometimes official data would actually just, for example, highlight initiatives that have been taken by policy makers and by the government in order to alleviate issues that are present out there within our communities. But at the same time, there will be situations where the communities themselves to whom those initiatives are targeted will tell you that, well, we're not really benefiting from all this. We don't really know that. Sometimes they even tell you that we don't really know that these initiatives actually exist. So these are the kind of things that can be galvanized together in terms of data in order for us to either address issues or also troubleshoot some issues that are still there. And of course, then when you recognize the complexities of lived realities, then you are able to come up with better solutions in trying to equalizing opportunity. One area that we have basically extracted from the mapping work that we do is a focus on, just to give an example, a focus on the lives of communities that live on small islands in Malaysia. Pulau-pulau kecil lah. So that's one of the policy theme that we are actually developing in APPGM SDG, because we found that communities that live on small islands, their socioeconomic challenges are more complex compared to those who live on the mainland side of the constituencies that we visit. And those challenges are very multidimensional. They can be, of course, socioeconomic. They can be, of course, related to poverty, related to the more material aspects of life, but also the other development challenges that they face that we think would require special attention. And this is something that we're also pushing when we do policy engagement. So those are the 4 responses or rejoinders that we have to the discussion surrounding equality of opportunity in Malaysia. I just want to go back to conclude to the possible outcomes of equalizing opportunities, because what I've tried to do is basically to try to propose that you can imagine equality of opportunity a bit different in the sense that you need to provide chances that are very much specific to the needs of the different communities who live in different geographical or who live in different locations and places in the country, in order for there to be more effective access to those opportunities. So a more diverse kind of opportunity, a more diverse kind of opportunities that are very much based on local needs and the uniqueness of all these different locations that we have in the country. But it's still very much possible to achieve all these general outcomes that I highlighted earlier, including, of course, reducing systemic inequalities, ensuring mobility, ensuring better economic growth, ensuring social cohesion, and also making sure that as we go along, the standards of public health gets better and better. So I think that's it. I hope that sharing is useful for many of you. Happy to have a discussion with you after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khairil Ahmad, for your comprehensive presentations and also sharing insight and also findings from the APPGM. I think there are many key takeaways actually, but one things that appear interesting to me when you mentions about recognizing different locations and community and tap their potential in equalizing the opportunity. So which means that I think what you are mentions about government as i.e. the policymaker, they should focus not only on the urban area, but identifying a small location or geographical area that have the potential to be developed, and in order for in order for us to equalize the opportunity among all. So I think that's very interesting. So which means that we don't left people behind, even they are having a small or living in a small location, but we try to tap their location and maximizing what we can do with them. Okay, Dr. Khairil, I guess there is an insight from the chat box from Mr. Zafar. So Mr. Zafar mentions something on the refugee. Okay, a refugee who receive education not only benefit themselves but also their community and host country. But as we know, a refugee in Malaysia, there are so much in terms of the accessibility, there are not so many accessibility to them in terms of the education, in terms of the health, in terms of the housing, because we don't really have the housing provisions or housing regulation for them. And Mr. Zafar also mentions about when there is a better policy on refugee, particularly on access to education. So this can improve the refugee protection and access to basic right in their host country. So maybe you want to give some insights on this perspective, Dr. Khairil, on this issue of the refugee.
Thank you, Dr. Mahazril. Thank you also to Mr. Zafar Ahmad. Yes, I should have also mentioned actually that amongst the groups that we actually meet on the ground, apologies, this is something that I missed out. Very crucial. It's a very crucial point. Would include refugee communities. So it's not only Malaysians that we meet lah. We try to make sure that depending on the location, we try to make sure that we also speak to such communities who indeed are suffering from the lack of access to basic rights, including education, as you mentioned, healthcare, employment, and also freedom of movement. This is something that, of course, because the context of the discussion is also the World Bank report. There's not much sort of mention on that because the focus is very much on the Malaysian sort of the context is very much on Malaysians. But I agree. There's got to be a serious discussion about opportunities also for refugee communities, and this is something that, of course, we also highlight in our reports. And you're most definitely right. A lot of the findings that we have would relate to lack of access to opportunities, especially education. So we do bring this to the policy table, but we don't have a particular sort of policy theme that's directed to this. But we do actually talk about people who are undocumented or stateless, that we also find in our issue mapping activities. But from my part, we are running a few research projects, and one that will will be starting soon is just a small research on access of Rohingya women to adult education. So be interesting to see where that heads to. It's part of a research grant program that we launched from my center, and one of the topics that we have actually supported is on education for Rohingya women. So that's still starting. So yeah, it's going to take some time before we actually get the paper produced. But yeah, that's some of our contributions to addressing those issues as well. So that again, because we work within the SDG framework, we try to make sure that nobody is left behind, whoever they are, in Malaysia.
All right, thank you, Dr. Khairil. Any other question from the audience about this issue?
I have a
Uh,
can I ask?
yes, Mr. Khairi?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Khairil, and thank you to Dr. Mahazril. So I think let me put my question in context. I always see equality is a kind of paradox where whenever you want to see equality, there is always you will deprive the right of others because economic resources are very limited, whether you like it or not. Even if you look in the case of Malaysia, for example, like the NEP, New Economic Policies, and a lot of other policies, often we try to address the historical inequality. So when you want to come up with a new policy, something to improve the equality of opportunities, so there will be somehow it may lead or form exclusion and inequality to some other groups or perhaps some other class, if you may want to put in that way. So how do we reconcile this kind of paradox of equality, Doctor? Terima kasih.
Thank you, Khairi. Khairi is actually my friend. Um, Thank you very much for the question. I think the paradox, for the most part, to me, it's a philosophical paradox. I mean, um it's an exercise in logic, in the sense that, yeah, you're right. As you actually recognize, a lot of this discussion is more geared towards recognition of certain rights. When you recognize the rights of certain groups, then you may actually deprive others of particular rights as well. And that when you map that onto when you map that into economic resources, then you also have to deal with the question of the fact that resources are always finite within any particular community, and distribution is going to be inevitably an exercise that would be excluding some group or others, regardless of how you actually try to address it. I think on the more practical level, those are the kind of trends that needs to be monitored. It's very difficult to actually predetermine, for example, which group will actually be deprived of access and rights before policy measures are actually implemented and taken. And that's why I mean, I didn't cover all the policy measures that were recommended by the report, but there is a recommendation that calls for continuous monitoring of trends of mobility and also inequality. So that's, I think, one of the policy sort of instruments that you can have in terms of making sure that you're always doing course correction when you're implementing certain measures that would ensure opportunity for certain groups. You're also making sure that you are constantly tracking and monitoring not only the outcomes that particular group is enjoying, but also what sort of exclusions are actually being experienced by all the other groups within society. Because I think you're right in what you're saying, but again, that's for me a philosophical point. But from the more practical/policy perspective, measures need to be implemented first before you can actually determine who exactly is being excluded. So for as long as there is the room and opportunity to include more and more sort of groups, then the onus is on the policymaker to try to look into it. And then as as those access and rights are implemented, then the onus is again on the policymakers to make sure that they are monitoring the not just the outcomes but also the effect of the policies that they're implementing, and then they can identify who are still being left out, who have actually been left out because of the measures that they've taken. But of course, there's always of course the room to project as well during policy making, just to make sure that before any policies are being implemented, you are confident enough that what you're doing would not only secure the rights and access of certain groups, but would also not take away the rights and access of others. I hope that helps. But yeah, that's my answer for now.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Khairil. I guess we have another question from Mr. Tangaraj.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Khairil and Dr. Mahazril. I didn't know a forum like this exists to discuss on equality of incomes and opportunities. I'm truly pleased in that sense. Doc, I have a question, whether it's inequality of opportunities or whether it's equality of income, it's very perceptible on the ground that we have achieved neither. Okay, it's very perceptible,
Yeah.
And, the policy measures is still very much, I'm not sure how useful it's going to be. It's very much communal based or race based instead of being haves, but, maybe distinguishing between rural and urban, or between the haves and have-nots, or rich and poor. Okay, if we have that kind of, equalities. Now, the other aspect I'd like to talk about is the equality of opportunities. Will it drive the equality of income if we just focus on the equality of opportunities? Okay, so I'd like to have your input on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tangaraj. Thank you for the questions. So there are two questions there, or two comments/questions. Now, one is with regard to the fact that whichever one you talk about, opportunity ke outcome, we've not exactly reached either lah. Yeah, you're right there, because I think that's also what the report actually says, right? I mean, there's been a lot of course, milestones and achievements, but at the same time, at different junctures of our sort of very short sort of history as a nation, we've managed a lot, but at the same time, at present where we are right now, we're not necessarily there's a lot to be proud of, but also a lot more to be done lah, in terms of the attainments of prosperity amongst all the different groups in the country. But I think as far as debates are concerned, especially within the policy sort of sphere, of course the drive is to try to make sure that we're looking at alternative ways lah, to try to mitigate all the issues that are still outstanding, and one of them is this lah, basically, which this meaning, try to look into how we can try to mitigate outstanding challenges by way of trying to equalize opportunities. But I guess my argument just now was sometimes the outcomes that we expect are very much so top-driven or elite-driven that the attainments are just not really possible for many groups and communities. And that's basically one of the issues. The other one, of course, as you mentioned, the approach can be quite communal. And this is one of the things that have been problematized by many. And I think the report also does not shy away from highlighting this. And the way it highlights it is basically saying that, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of race, what we're seeing now, the trend we're seeing in the country is basically the rich getting richer, no matter who they are. And the haves are getting more share of the pie, and the have-nots are basically left behind. And this is regardless of whoever they are. And sometimes also, as the report mentioned, communal-based policies can also have very alarming blind spots. And one of which is basically, for so long, there's a lot of focus on uplifting the status of Bumiputra economic attainments. This is basically driven by, of course, the NEP and beyond, right? But at the same time, even within the community themselves, there's a lot of disparities. Meaning, in the end of the day, if you look at the bigger picture trend, to go back to what I said earlier, you're just looking at how different classes are basically experiencing different trajectory of mobility. The rich can be whoever are getting richer, if we can put it that way. And those who are not so rich, those who are living in poverty, are not necessarily catching up. And that's the big issue. Secondly is the question on how equalizing opportunities can actually, you mentioned income, can also equalize income. That's the context of the report as well. The argument is, if you equalize opportunity, then you are providing the platform. So you're not really equalizing opportunity does not necessarily causes increase, for example, in income attainments of anyone, but it allows everyone to have a platform to at least feel that actually, if I take the effort, right, I can get to that different place that I really want to get to. I think that's the biggest thing here, and that's what the survey I cited towards the end just now was highlighting. Many Malaysians now feel that even if I take the effort, I will not necessarily get to where I want to. So now the challenge is to basically tell everybody that if you try, you can. And that's the issue right now. The outcome is not decided for now. The outcome depends on you making use of the opportunity that you have, take responsibility, and see whether or not you can head towards where you want to head. That's basically what is lacking right now. And that's basically the crux of the discussion about equality of opportunity. And that platform needs to be, people need to believe that that platform is there, is the argument here. Where we head to, you and me, it depends on how we make use, how we take responsibility, how we work towards getting to where we want to get at But the platform has to be there. Kalau tak ada that, if that platform is not there, the belief is not there, then people will feel defeated, despondent, and they feel like, okay whatever I do, nothing will happen. And that's, we're not there yet. The survey also, it's not like majority of Malaysians feel that. It's just that many Malaysians feel that. Why they feel that, we don't know. And I think that's a very important research question. So if there's any students here who would like to take it up, it's a very nice research gap that you can try to plug there. I hope that helps, Mr. Tanggaraj.
Yeah, I can provide some input because as an economic advisor to several trade unions in the country, there's finance report that came out last year. 50% of Malaysian workers, research by Khazanah from between 2010 to 2019, saw only a real income increase of 500 ringgit.
Yeah.
So no wonder generally people are feeling, if we work hard, I'm not going to get there.
Yeah.
If you go to, so it's more of a class issue. You're right. But it's being framed in it could have been framed better. We want to really achieve better outcomes for the country. I'm all in for new economic policy, and I think there should be equitable distribution of income. Otherwise, there'll be social disorder.
Yeah.
But looking from the perspective of workers alone, Even if you look at 70% of the Malaysian workers total from the bottom, if you look at the cumulative figures, it's not so exciting. Maybe you're looking at 500 to 700 increment over a period of 10 years. That's not really exciting for a growing economy, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you for the insightful discussion.
Thank you also for the insight from the unions. These are the kind of insights that we want to have also lah. I mean, these are the kind of these are the kind of insights and trends that confirm lah that there's got to be more work done lah in order to instill the belief amongst Malaysians that change can come. Because I mean, you're talking about the unions. I mean, you can also try to think about some research have been done already on this, right? About how unemployed graduates are feeling, because the investment in order to actually obtain education, higher education, for example. I mean, the capital is already so much. A lot of them will have student debt, but once they graduate, the promise of mobility that comes with higher education is not fulfilled. So they end up being in debt, and also they end up, not actually having the right platform to basically experience that mobility. And that has also contributed, and this is something that we've also not really touched upon, right? That's also contributed to the proliferation of informal economic activities that's taking place in the country. And that's a huge legislative question as well for the government. How do you account for the presence of so many informal workers in the labor market who are without social protection, who don't have the safety nets lah.
Can I just add there, Doc, you pointed out a very important point. It's also in the economic report that we produce about 220,000 graduates, the diploma degree holders. But the number of high-skilled jobs that we generated in the economy was only about half of it.
Yeah. So that's the issue lah. Also, I mean, that's a good point. One word of, I mean, for me lah, personally, a word of caution also lah. That's why I highlighted this, you see all these big economic forums in the hotels and all that. It's all about how their future industries, future growth will come from all these big short industries.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not actually solving the current, I mean, this promise, the promise that is being made right now, the same promise was made about a decade ago for those graduates back then. Now that promise has not been fulfilled. Now a new one is coming. So that's why I think we need to take stock lah, and also try to see whether or not local-based economies, solidarity-based economies are also important contributors, and maybe a mindset shift can also be affected there lah, so that people can aspire to do all these activities without feeling like they're not contributing or we're not suffering from stigma lah. Because there's a lot of people who want to engage in activities that would directly contribute to their local communities, but at the same time, the broader discourse on education, on jobs, they're a bit different lah. The tone is different, I think. Tone is important also, because not everything is centered around KL. KL is KL is KL, but outside KL, life can be different lah. And we have to acknowledge that.
Sure. If you leave your email address behind, I'll send you some of these reports.
Can. Most definitely. I'll just type.
Thank you so much.
Type it here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tanggaraj. Thank you. Mr. Tanggaraj, I will also want to contact you because you are dealing with the union. I'm doing some study on the union as well. Okay, thank you, Mr. Tanggaraj. Okay,
Sure.
so do we have any other question from the audience? Because I can see just now Prof. Nick Mariam, if I'm not mistaken, raising the hand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khairil. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity. Actually, I'm wearing several hats. I'm at UM, but now I'm asking from ASM, Academy Science Malaysia, perspective. We also do flagship projects like Science Outlook, and I think it's very enough reasons that you need to go on the ground despite many data out there. So I would like to know from Dr. Khairil, whether do you also look into how the ecosystem based on STIE, because we are from academic science, we're talking about science, technology, innovation, and economy
Mm.
that you see on the ground that can help to empower, because we have to come up with another report this year, and we'll be looking more on the STIE to empower at the different region, because we realize
Mm.
that the disparity is very apparent between region and between states. Your insight. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. The answer is yes, lah. I mean, when we go to the ground, we do actually gather inputs from people, especially amongst those who would like to upgrade their existing economic activities. And this would require a lot of investments from their side, lah, in terms of coming up with a capital to buy machineries and also technologies that would enable them to do the upgrade lah. So example would be farmers who would require certain machines, and that means that they would either have to apply for loans or also grants on from all the different financial institutions, and that's something that many of them lack access to. That's one example. The other one is with regard to the fisher folks, the fishing communities, which is also important. Just now I mentioned small island communities, but we also meet a lot of people who engage in people who are fishermen, basically. And that the situation is dire in the sense that, of course, there is, and this is, I think, supported by data also, there's a reduction in fish stock in the sea, most especially, right? So those who are nelayan pantai, those who are nelayan tradisi also, we call them traditional fishermen who've always been engaging in their fishing activities nearer to the shores, suffering from a lack of income nowadays. And that's where that's where one of the problems is, and that's with regard to how exactly can you uplift the livelihoods of these folks. One solution is, and I think this is one of the solutions that at the level of policy making as well, the government wants to push, and that is basically to push them to invest in going further out in the sea to engage in deep sea fishing, for example. But then the equipment requires a lot of investment, and then you also need technological know-how. You need the skills and also the knowledge. That also requires a lot of investments. If the government is to subsidize that, then that's quite a huge undertaking. But then from the perspective of the community, they also cannot invest in such huge sort of undertaking. So these are some of the stuff that we find. But we have been engaging also with policymakers, and there's a lot of awareness amongst policymakers that there's a lot of issues that's very much related to technological access, most especially on the ground, that would actually indeed help spur local economies. And it's a huge policy question, Prof. I think we want to look into that, most definitely.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khairil, for sharing. Definitely, we feel that that's why we wanted to know the STIE ecosystem landscape at the different localities, because I think we are also required to give policy recommendations in our report, and to help us, to identify, how to come up at the least possible financial that can bring up new technology that can be made available to the different folks in different places. We'll be getting in touch with you with the report if you don't mind. We'll be bringing you a visit soon, I hope. Thank you.
And Prof, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. I'm sorry to say this, Dr. Khairil, and also all the audience, but this is the times that we have for now. So if you have any question we didn't get to today, or think of any questions, you may contact our speaker, Dr. Khairil. Dr. Khairil dropped the email there in the chat box, so you can check and contact Dr. Khairil after this, I guess. So
Sorry,
thank you. Sorry, Dr. Khairil?
Sorry, Dr. Mahaz. Sorry, apologies. I think I took a bit long.
Eh,
Yeah, but enjoyed the discussion a lot.
No worry. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khairil, for sharing your insight, sharing the findings from what you are currently doing right now with the AAPGM. There are also questions for me, but I guess I will contact you later. Okay, so thank you for all the audience. For those who asked the question and sharing the insight, thank you very much. And I return back to Miss Suhaila from UAC.
Terima kasih Dr. Mahazril dan Dr. Khairil Ahmad atas syarahan yang penuh wacana kritis dan refleksi mendalam mengenai topik kita hari ini. Terima kasih kepada Dr. Mahazril yang telah mengemudi sesi dengan baik selaku moderator kita. Dan akhir kata, saya harap agar perkongsian kita hari ini akan terus merangsang perbincangan dan tindakan yang lebih dalam kalangan pembuat dasar, akademik dan masyarakat untuk membina Malaysia yang lebih adil dan sama untuk semualah. So semoga kita dapat bertemu lagi dalam sesi yang akan datang dengan semangat yang sama demi ilmu, dasar dan kemajuan bersama. Sebelum mengakhiri sesi ini, saya mohon semua peserta untuk membuka kamera untuk kita ambil gambar. Boleh? Okey. Mohon semua untuk buka kamera ya. Okey. Okey. Dalam kiraan 1, 2, 3, kita ambil gambar 1, 2, 3. Freestyle. Okey. Okey, 1, 2, 3. Okey, terima kasih semua. InsyaAllah kita berjumpa lagi dalam sesi syarahan awam USP yang akan datang. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih semua.
Waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih
Salam.
semua. Thank you so much, Dr.
Terima kasih.
Khairil. Thank you all.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Salam.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.